Please remain standing the whole time. I just want to see if you're listening. Please be seated. It's interesting, these two readings today. This thing about fruits and trees, and whether they're good or bad. And this whole piece with Abraham first encountering God and getting the promise. And some of it, I think, is very, it just comes down to language. Abraham is kind of whining to God about not having offspring. And the heir of my house is Eliezer of Damascus, and Abram said, you have given me no offspring, so a slave born in my house is to be my heir. But the word of the Lord came to him, saying, this man shall not be your heir. No one but your very own issue shall be your heir. He says, look to the stars. Your descendants will be as numerous as them. So we have this word heir and descendant. And later on, we hear in the New Testament and the Gospels how the people of Israel consider themselves children of Abraham. Our father Abraham, we're all one in the tribes. And we get the descent through the rest of the Old Testament. But I think these words, they mean things that are different from one another, heir, children, and descendant. But they also mean things differently then than they do now. A child is a child, but a child can be adopted, and they're still your child. But are they your descendant? Whereas descendant only sort of the issue of your body. There's a genetic piece to it. So you could be someone's descendant and someone else's child. And then heir is just a legal term. You could disinherit your children, you could disinherit your descendants, and someone else could be your heir. So there's sort of different things at play here. At this point, Abram had made Eliezer, who was one of his slaves, his heir to legally inherit, because he had no children, he had no offspring, he had no descendants. And God promises that his descendants will be as numerous as the stars. His actual blood-related descendants. And later on, we get to the people of Israel all saying, well, we are descendants of our father Abraham, and they have a claim to that because of his actual progeny. And then we start talking about God in the Christian sense. Are we descendants of God? Do we use that phrase? No. We're children of God because we are adopted by God. We are not physically descendant of God. And we start to use inheritors and children a little bit interchangeably because we are to inherit God's kingdom, but we do so because we are children of God. You can't be an inheritor of God's kingdom if you are not a child of God. And so these words, they carry a little more weight than maybe we necessarily think about it when we first hear it. But I think when we hear words like heir, child, even sons and daughters. Sons and daughters are both children, but sons bear legal right within the context of this. So when we hear sons and daughters of God versus children of God, that might even mean something a little bit different. And one of the reasons why I don't like when they change when it says sons of God is because you lose that inheritance piece that is intrinsic in this. But we don't necessarily have that understanding today. It carries more weight here. So what does that have to do with fruit? Well, obviously with descendants and fruit, it's sort of that offspring, fruitful, procreation, all of that. And it's interesting because I just heard this the other day. We're talking about good trees bearing good fruit, bad trees bearing bad fruit. Do you know that apples don't produce seeds? So if you take a seed from an apple, you have a gala apple, and you take one of the seeds and you plant it, you grow an apple tree. It's not going to produce the same apples. Every apple seed produces a unique tree that will produce unique fruit. So and this is how that we get so many varieties of apples, and you can crossbreed them and things like that. So if you want to continue to produce, say, you're like, this is the best gala apple I've ever had, instead of taking seeds from those and planting them, you actually take cuttings from the branches and graft them into the tree, and then it'll continue to produce that same gallon apple. So it won't produce its own tree, its own fruit. You cut those away and you leave these grafted on. And I just heard that and it was like, oh, okay, that's kind of an interesting thing. Didn't really put any context to it. But as soon as I read this, I went, well, that's exactly what's going on with God and the people of Israel, or the nation, the kingdom of Israel, and then the people, the Israelites. Because once Jesus comes, and it's not just the Hebrews anymore, he starts grafting the Gentiles and all the Greeks and all these other people into this tree that is God, that is God's household, that is the descendants of Abraham. And suddenly, the children are not just the descendants, but it's everyone. It's all of the fruit that's being born by what Abraham had started. And so, bad trees can't bear good fruit. Good trees can't bear bad fruit. So if you're grafted into the good tree, which is God, you can't bear bad fruit. But if you're grafted into a bad tree, that's something different. So we need to watch out for these false prophets in sheep's clothing that are actually wolves that Jesus is warning about. But because of grafting, we're not stuck where we are. We can be regrafted somewhere else. That's why we don't exclude those baptized in other traditions from our communion. That's why we don't shut our doors to people that aren't card-carrying Episcopalians who don't come with their own Book of Common Prayer and the Prayer of Humble Access memorized. We allow them to be part of us. We allow them to graft themselves into us. We allow ourselves to be grafted onto other things that are good so that we can bear good fruit. How many times, I'm sure Stephanie has been witness to this more than most, I'll say, hey, I saw this at another church and I thought it was a good idea, let's do it. It's because good fruit, we can graft onto ourselves to continue to bear good fruit. So you could take a tree, an apple that is producing crab apples, and you could graft good branches onto it and it will produce good fruit. You essentially make the tree that is not producing what you want into what you want to produce. Now, if the tree's rotten, it's not going to produce. But if it has the vitality, it can produce better fruit by grafting on the good branches. And so, this didn't come up in this reading, but I'm sure it's something that's familiar. All these, you are the branches, I am the vine, this is God's garden. This is all of that language that Jesus talks about over and over again. This is what it means. Because they were grafting trees and vines and branches back at the time. The people he was speaking to would have intrinsically understood that message of how to take good fruit and graft it into different trees and not to put it onto a rotten, dying tree. But if you put it into a good tree, it would bear the fruit that you wanted. And if God's the gardener, he knows what trees to graft and what fruit will be born. To God be all the glory, now and forever.